The moment I saw the amount on the check, I forgot how to breathe. $14,650.28. That was it. That was the final distribution, paid to me from my grandmother's trust. On Tuesday morning, I found a thick, cream-colored envelope in my mailbox. I saw the name Harding Law Office in the corner. I stood frozen right there. I could feel my fingers trembling as I tore open the edge of the envelope. Inside was a statement. Rows of fine print lined the page. Management fees. Expense reimbursements. Trustee compensation. More than 10 years of numbers were quietly stacked beneath my name. But only one sentence stuck in the back of my mind. It didn't make sense. Trust expenditures do not require beneficiary consent. My smartphone buzzed. It was a short message from my mother. Did it arrive? Your check. Don't spend it all at once. I didn't delete the message. I left it on the screen and looked at the statement one more time. I didn't know if I should doubt it. Or if I should just accept it in silence.
Was it wrong of me to try and find out how this money was spent?
My name is Sophie Lane. I had just turned 28. On the morning of my birthday, the only thing I received from my mother was a short text. Happy birthday. Don't work too hard today. There were no other words. Not a mention of the trust. Not a word about my grandmother. I live alone in a regional city. After graduating from college, I got a job at a real estate company. I work in a department handling commercial properties and high-end homes. My days are filled with contracts and numbers. I don't live a flashy life. I pay my rent with my own salary. I maintain my car. I save a little bit at a time. My family consists of my parents and one older sister. My sister's name is Emma. She is 3 years older than me. She married young and divorced quickly. Now, she raises her daughter alone while posting about her life on the internet. In photos, Emma always looks busy, but she also looks full of confidence. Since we were children, we weren't very alike. Emma talked a lot. She laughed a lot. She demanded a lot. I was the child who listened silently and answered only when necessary. My mother used to say, Sophie really is a low-maintenance child. I always thought that was a compliment. My grandmother passed away when I was in high school. After the funeral, talk of my future came up a few times in the house. Grandma left something behind for you, Mom would say. Then she would end the conversation. How much was it? Where was it being kept? When could I use it? I never asked for details. Not once. It felt rude to ask. I thought if my parents were managing it, then that was fine. My father is a quiet man. He rarely interferes with household decisions. My mother managed the household finances. The bank books, the insurance policies, everything was in her drawer. It's too early, she would say. Better not to touch it now. When you turn 28, it will be yours to use freely. Mom repeated this over and over. For my college tuition, I took out student loans myself. I paid my way by working part-time jobs. There was almost no financial support from my parents. When I entered college, I asked my mother just once. Is it okay if I don't take out a loan? Mom made a face like she was thinking for a moment. Then she spoke. For now, yes. It's not time yet. After that answer, I didn't ask anything else. Some of my friends had their parents pay for their tuition. Some received a monthly allowance. I lived on part-time wages and loans. I went to classes during the day. In the evening, I ran a cash register at a supermarket. At night, I did the closing shift at a family restaurant. When I returned to my room, exhausted, I often fell asleep before I could even open a textbook. There is one memory I still can't let go of. It was the winter of my sophomore year. I had been accepted into a study abroad program in London. It was a short-term program, just 3 months, but for me, it was a dazzling dream. I had worked double shifts for months to save for the airfare. But I was short on the living expenses. I brought the acceptance letter to my parents' house. I laid it on the table, my heart pounding. "I really want to go," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "It's a once-in-a-lifetime chance. Can you help me, just this once?" Mom looked at the letter, then at Dad, and finally sighed. "Sophie," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "We just don't have that kind of liquidity right now. With the economy the way it is, we have to be careful." "But Grandma left money, didn't she?" I asked, pushing harder than I ever had before. "That is for your future security," Mom cut me off. "Using it for a short trip now would be irresponsible. You have to think long-term." I withdrew my application the next day. I remember crying in the dormitory bathroom so my roommate wouldn't hear me. I told myself my parents were right. I told myself I was being selfish. But now, looking at the statement, I saw the entry for that exact same month. Expense reimbursement, $4,500. And right below it, special disbursement, travel expenses. I froze. That date. It was the same month Emma went to Hawaii for her mental recovery. After her first breakup with her boyfriend. I remember seeing her photos on social media, blue ocean, white sand. And a bright cocktail in her hand. I needed to get away, she had told me. Mom and Dad said I needed a break. My dream of studying in London was traded for my sister's week in Hawaii. The liquidity existed. It just wasn't for me. It never was for me. The realization hit me harder than the total amount on the check. It wasn't about the money saved, it was about the experiences stolen. To be honest, I felt dissatisfied many times. If there was a money for the future, why wasn't it being used for my life right now? But that question was always silenced by the same words. It's still too early. It's not something to use now. When the time comes, we will hand it over properly. Mom never mentioned a specific amount. Dad would change the subject whenever it came up. I didn't think my parents were hiding anything. I just thought I didn't understand how it was managed. My sister, Emma, got married right after college. It was a young, impulsive marriage. At that time, money was discussed frequently at home. Wedding costs. The deposit for the new house. Buying furniture. One night, I heard my mother and father talking in low voices in the living room. "It's just temporary. We can put it back later." I stopped in the hallway. I didn't listen to the rest of that conversation. When my sister divorced and came back, the situation was more urgent. Entrance fees for daycare. Lawyer consultation fees. Living expenses until she found a new job. Emma often said to me, "I'm sorry. I just don't have any room to breathe right now." I didn't know what she was apologizing for. Every time I returned to my parents' house, I noticed the furniture changing little by little. The sofa was new. The TV was bigger. The car had been replaced. I assumed Dad got a raise. It isn't a bad thing for a family's life to improve gradually. I had no reason to doubt it. Even after becoming a working adult, I rarely relied on my parents. Moving costs, buying a car, I covered everything with my own savings. Mom often said, "You are so independent." It's admirable. I was honestly happy to hear those words. Living on my own power. That was my pride. Maybe that's why I tried not to think too deeply about where and how the money for my future was being used. It wasn't that I trusted them blindly. It was more that by not thinking about it, I was protecting my relationship with my family. Until I opened that envelope, I always thought that was the correct choice. I had wondered about it many times, though. If there is money for the future, why can't I get help now? But I didn't voice that question. My parents are surely managing it correctly. I just don't have the qualification to handle it yet. It was more natural to think that way. After Emma divorced, there was a period when she moved back home. She brought her young daughter and a lot of baggage. During that time, the atmosphere in the house was a bit tense. A new daycare. Job hunting. Meetings with lawyers. One night, I heard Mom on the phone in the kitchen. "It's a family matter. We just need to put it back later." I didn't think about the meaning of those words. When deciding something in our family, Dad speaks, Mom summarizes. Emma gives her opinion, and finally, I nod. That was our family's way. As my 28th birthday approached, Mom said this on the phone. "It's almost time. Finally, it's your turn." I believed those words innocently. Something my parents had protected for a long time was finally coming back to my hands. Until I opened the envelope, I never once thought something might be wrong. I didn't go to work that day. I didn't take a paid vacation day. I just put on my suit in the morning and realized I shouldn't go in. I couldn't explain the reason well. But I didn't feel like doing my usual work with that statement sitting on my desk. I laid the envelope, the check, and the statement on the kitchen table. The light coming through the window made the whiteness of the paper stand out sharply. I brewed coffee, sat in a chair, and started reading from the top sheet. The first page contained only formal greetings. Trust name. Beneficiary name. Distribution date. Payment method. Up to that point, nothing was strange. From the second sheet, the table began. Management fees. Trustee compensation. Expense reimbursement. Tax preparation fees. Administrative expenses. The items were all legally correct terms. At least, as far as I knew. I took a pen and made small marks next to the amounts. Year 1. Year 2. Year 3. For the first few years, there was almost no movement. The balance was large, the fees were minimal, and there were no significant expenditures. For a while after my grandmother died, this trust seemed to simply sleep quietly. Changes began to appear around the time I graduated from high school. The amount of management fees increased little by little. The frequency of expense reimbursements changed from a few times a year to every month. Unconsciously, I started writing small notes next to the years. College entrance. Emma's wedding. Emma's divorce. I tried to think it was a coincidence. Linking events to expenditures might just be my imagination. But the sequence of numbers was too regular. In a certain year, the expense reimbursements were almost the same amount every month. An amount like rent. A rhythm like a loan repayment. I looked back at that page again and again. I repeated the meaning of the words, expense reimbursement, in my head. Whose expense? What expense? Where was it paid? The statement offered no further explanation. The next page listed the trustee compensation all at once. Once a year, in a set month, almost the same amount. I looked at that month and held my breath. That month coincided with the year Emma moved back home. It might be a coincidence. I tried to think so. But I could no longer close the page with just the word coincidence. I opened my laptop and started researching the basic structure of trusts. Beneficiary. Grantor. Trustee. It was clear that I was the beneficiary. My grandmother was the grantor. And the trustees were my parents. I reread the explanation about the authority of trustees many times. The trustee has the authority to make expenditures deemed necessary for the benefit of the beneficiary. Trust expenditures do not require beneficiary consent. I returned to that sentence again and again. For some reason, the words from the morning I first opened the envelope floated into my mind. Trust expenditures do not require beneficiary consent. I thought back over nearly 20 years of my life. College. Scholarships. Part-time jobs. Moving. Buying a car. In none of those scenes did the word trust appear. I took my notebook out of the drawer and lined up old household account books and tuition statements. I overlaid each event with the trust's expenditure chronology. They didn't match perfectly, but I couldn't say they were unrelated either. I put down my pen many times and looked out the window. Another date caught my eye. It was from 3 years ago. October 14th. I remember that day vividly because it was the day my old used car finally died on the highway. It was pouring rain. I was stranded on the shoulder for 3 hours waiting for a tow truck because I couldn't afford the premium roadside assistance service. The repair cost was $800. I didn't have it. I had to beg my landlord for an extension on rent and ate plain toast for dinner for 2 weeks to make up the difference. I had called Mom that night, crying. My car broke down, I told her. I don't know what to do. Oh, that's terrible, she said. But you're strong. You'll figure it out. It's part of being an adult. She didn't offer help. I didn't ask, because I thought there was no money to spare. But here, on the statement, dated October 16th, 2 days after I was stranded in the rain, there was a withdrawal. Household improvement, $3,200. I closed my eyes and dug through my memory. What happened that month? Then it clicked. That was the month Dad bought the new 65-inch 4K television and the surround sound system for the living room. I remembered visiting them for Thanksgiving and Dad showing it off proudly. The picture quality is amazing, he had said, beaming. It makes watching movies feel like being in a theater. I was eating toast in the dark to pay for a transmission repair, while my trust fund was buying a home theater system for a house I didn't live in. Trust expenditures do not require beneficiary consent. The sentence echoed in my mind again. Did beneficiary mean me? Or did it actually mean the family excluding Sophie? The ink on the paper seemed to blur as my hands started to shake, not from cold, but from a quiet, boiling rage I had never allowed myself to feel before. In the afternoon, my mother called. You said it arrived yesterday. Did you check it properly? I hesitated for a moment. Should I say, I saw it? Or I not yet? I looked at it a little. When I answered, Mom spoke immediately. You don't need to worry about the details. That's all just procedure. Procedure. I repeated that word in my heart many times. If there's anything you don't understand, let me know, Mom said in her usual voice. I answered, it's okay. After hanging up, I opened the last page of the statement one more time. Final balance. $14,650.28. Is this amount a lot? Or a little? Is it correct? Or is it wrong? I was not yet in a position to say either. However, one thing was certain. I could no longer pretend to know nothing about this money. That evening, I put the statement in my desk drawer and went outside. I didn't have the energy to investigate anything, nor the courage to contact anyone. But sitting alone in my room, those numbers and that single sentence kept coming back to me. Trust expenditures do not require beneficiary consent. I knew it was institutional language, but it felt like a judgment directed at me personally. In my life so far, how many decisions about my future have I made myself? Where to go to school? Taking out loans. Starting to live alone. Where to work? On the surface, these were all things I chose. But in the background, there were always words like, this much is okay. Anything more is too soon. Better not to touch it now. I had never doubted the sensation that I was being made to choose. Mom decides. Dad acquiesces. Emma moves forward first. And I choose the option left at the end. I thought that was the natural order. I opened the desk drawer and took out the statement one last time. I didn't follow the numbers. I just slowly looked at the sequence of years. High school. college, Emma's wedding, Emma's divorce. My life's milestones, family events, and trust expenditures were lined up quietly on the same line. It wasn't proof. It wasn't an accusation. It just clearly highlighted the fact that I never received an explanation about how this money was used. I didn't call anyone that night. Not Mom, not Emma. Not friends, not a lawyer. I just decided to let this doubt grow quietly inside me for a little while longer. If this is a misunderstanding, I can verify it. If this is a fact, then for the first time in my life, I have to stop pretending I don't know. At that moment, I finally realized. This isn't a story about money. This is a question of who has been deciding my life. I sat at my desk and took out a notebook. I didn't intend to leave a record. I just felt like I couldn't sleep unless I let the thoughts in my head out once. The first line I wrote was, "What do I want to know?" It isn't the amount. I don't even want it returned. I don't want to judge them. I simply want to know, for the first time, who made which decisions during the important moments of my life. Why wasn't it used for my tuition? Why was it used for Emma's wedding? Why did they never explain it to me? I was beginning to understand that the problem was the not being informed itself. Beneficiary consent is not required. That institutional phrase might be a reason to stay silent. But it shouldn't be a reason to silence someone. I remembered several conversations with my family. It's too early. Better not to touch it now. It's for your own good. I know those were all words without malice. But within those words, my judgment was never once required. I added just one more line to the notebook. Didn't I have the right to receive an explanation? When I wrote that, I felt the heaviness deep in my chest turn into words for the first time. It wasn't preparation to blame someone. It wasn't a resolve to fight. I just decided that the next time I contacted someone, I would be clear about what I want to know. Whether that person would be Mom, or Emma, or someone else entirely. I hadn't decided yet. But I made one promise to myself. I will not look away from this doubt again. Deciding that, I closed the notebook. The next morning, the first person who came to mind was my sister. Before asking Mom, I wanted to choose someone in the family who was easier to talk to. Emma was always the one who spoke her true feelings before I did. Just past noon, I sent Emma a message. I have something I want to ask you a little bit about. The reply came immediately. I'm between jobs right now. What is it? I wrote and deleted several sentences before finally sending this. It's about Grandma's trust. It wasn't marked as read for a while. A few minutes later, a short reply came. That? Now? I replied only, it's not urgent. In the evening, Emma called me. I could hear a child's voice faintly in the background. What's wrong? Emma's voice was a little lower than usual. I didn't get straight to the point. I looked at the statement a little. Just with that, Emma went silent for a moment. And? There was less left than I thought. I didn't say the amount. Emma didn't ask. There were management fees and various things written down. I chose to speak only facts as much as possible. Emma didn't say anything for a while. So, she finally said. I was wondering how that kind of money was used from before. I didn't utter the phrase, was it embezzled? Emma sighed. Sophie, that was like family money. The way she said it was a little surprising to me. It's Grandma's legacy, but Mom and Dad were managing it, right? Rather than an account just for you. I thought about the meaning of those words. But it was in my name. When I said that, Emma said immediately. It's not a question of whose name it is. At that moment, I felt something shift slightly. Because we've always been a family, haven't we? Emma spoke in a calm voice. Your tuition, my wedding, everything revolved around the same household money. I couldn't reply for a while. I took out student loans. When I said that, Emma paused a little before speaking. That's because you wanted to be independent, right? Her tone wasn't accusing. Rather, it sounded like an explanation she was convinced of. You were always like that. Wanting to do everything alone. I didn't know what I had been expecting. Then, wasn't that money left for me? When I asked that, Emma didn't answer right away. Grandma was worried about you the most. That phrasing was neither affirmation nor denial. But in reality, there was the family's life happening at the same time. Somewhere in my heart, I thought, that is correct. After hanging up, I sat there unable to do anything for a while. Emma wasn't lying. At least, she believes so herself. The next day, a message came from Mom. Did you talk to Emma yesterday? I replied only a little. Did she say anything strange? I pondered that sentence for a long time. I just asked a little about the numbers. When I replied with that, the phone rang immediately. You're worrying too much. Mom said that right off the bat. Trusts are just like that. You won't understand just by looking at the detailed breakdown. I started to say. But the milestones of my life and the timing of the expenditures overlap a little. It's a coincidence. Mom said it instantly. Not everything revolves around you. I couldn't argue with those words. You remember about the family, right? Mom continued. When things were hard for Emma. You must have seen it too. I listened silently. Keeping everything just for you, that isn't realistic. Her tone wasn't accusing. Rather, it was a voice asking, please understand. You received it properly in the end, didn't you? I just said, well, yes, but. Then that's fine. Mom said that and ended the conversation. After hanging up, I couldn't move, leaving my phone on the desk. No one said, we stole it. No one said, we did something wrong. Just words like, it was for the family. It was necessary. It was right. Those words just quietly piled up. For the first time, I didn't know what I was looking for. Was it money? An explanation? An apology? Or did I just want them to say, my life belonged to me? That night, I opened the statement one more time. The numbers were the same as yesterday. The written words hadn't changed. The only thing that had changed was my position looking at them. For the first time, I clearly voiced the question in my heart. Was this money ever really mine? And I knew that the answer wouldn't come immediately. I went back to my parents' house on the weekend. There wasn't a special reason. Mom said, show your face, it's been a while, so I drove the 2 hours just like always. The house was a little newer than when I left. The front door. The garden fence. The living room sofa. I had accepted without question that they changed them because they were old. Mom was in the kitchen and Dad was reading the newspaper. It was the usual scene. Welcome home. Mom said it in her usual voice. I took off my coat, put down my bag, and drank the tea she had prepared. We talked about the weather for a while. News about Emma and my niece. Talk about Dad's company. I repeated in my heart many times, I didn't come here to talk about that today. After the meal, Dad left the table, and only Mom and I remained in the kitchen. I placed a copy of that statement on the table. Mom looked at it once and seemed to understand immediately. Are you still worrying about that? Her way of speaking was neither blaming nor surprised. Just a tone of being slightly troubled. It's not that I'm worrying, I searched for words. I just want to know properly how the system worked. Mom was silent for a while. It's a difficult story. Saying that, she sat deep in her chair. Trusts aren't that simple. I pressed my finger on a part of the statement. This year's expense reimbursement. Mom lowered her eyes. We used that for the house. Which part of the house? I asked slowly, trying not to raise my voice. When it was Emma. You remember, don't you? It was really hard back then. I nodded. I understand that. It was for you too. Mom said that immediately. If the family fell apart, you would lose your place too, wouldn't you? I couldn't completely deny that logic. But I was never informed about it. Not once. When I said that, Mom said quietly, "There was no need to confirm with you." The moment I heard those words, I heard that sentence from someone's mouth for the first time. The system is made that way. Mom continued matter-of-factly. While you were a minor, we had to make the judgments. I repeated those words in my heart many times. Beneficiary consent was not required. But I was already an adult. You were still young. Mom replied instantly. We didn't think you could manage money. At those words, for the first time, I felt my breath catch a little. I've been supporting myself all this time. That and this are different. Mom's voice became a little stronger. You didn't know the weight of money. I couldn't answer immediately. We were protecting you. Mom said that and placed her hand on the stack of papers. That was our job. I asked, then, do you think this final remaining amount is correct? Mom thought a little before saying, rather than correct. I think it was realistic. I ruminated on that answer in my heart. Realistic. It was money Grandma was supposed to have left for me. When I said that, Mom made a slightly troubled face for the first time. She was worried about you the most. Those were the same words Emma had used. But in reality, we had to think about the whole family. I started to say, my life's milestones were never prioritized once, but stopped. If I let those words out, I felt I couldn't go back. Instead, I said quietly, I was never able to think of this money as my own. Not once. Mom looked at me, slightly surprised. That is your problem. I nodded. Maybe so. Silence continued for a long time. Dad came back from the living room. What are you talking about? Mom just said, about the trust. Dad looked back and forth between me and the statement, stayed silent for a while, and then spoke. If you received it in the end, then that's the end of it. Those words were not in an accusing tone. It was just a way of saying, the problem is already solved. At that moment, I understood clearly. These people will never think they were wrong. Not for the rest of their lives. But these people will also never think they are bad people. I remembered that sentence one more time. Beneficiary consent was not required. That was the language of the institution. But the ones who used it to live were my family, right in front of my eyes. I stopped trying to prove anything anymore. I just wanted to know that today. Saying that, I stood up. Mom asked, what did you learn? I thought for a while before saying. That I always felt like I was put last in this house. I said those words without raising my voice. Mom couldn't say anything. While putting on my shoes in the entryway, I looked back just once. This house was my place. But it was also the place that decided my life without my consent. When I went outside, the sky was quietly starting to darken. As I started the car engine, I thought clearly for the first time, let's get away from here a little. After leaving my parents' house, I couldn't stop the car for a while. I didn't know where I intended to go myself. I just didn't feel like going back to that house. I got on the highway and drove without setting a destination. I didn't turn on the radio. Only the streetlights flowing outside the window crossed my vision at regular intervals. In my head, Mom's words, Dad's words, and Emma's words floated up and vanished without order. No one was trying to hurt me. At least, they think so themselves. It was for the family. It was a realistic judgment. The system was like that. None of those were lies. It was late at night when I returned to my apartment. Without turning on the lights, I took off my shoes, hung my coat on a chair, and sat on the sofa just like that. I took out that statement one more time. The numbers were no longer surprising. I no longer thought, it's too little or it's too much. Instead, I quietly accepted the fact that this is everything left for me. At that time, for the first time, I remembered those words. The sentence I didn't understand when I first read it. Beneficiary consent was not required. Back then, I thought it was just an explanation of the system. Now, I felt it described the shape of my life exactly. Consent was not required. Therefore, the important parts of my life were decided quietly without my knowledge. I didn't think it was stolen. Or, I was betrayed. I just was able to put into words clearly for the first time. There was a long time when I didn't have a seat in my own life. The next week, I sent a short message to my mother. I'm going to distance myself for a while. I didn't write the reason. I didn't explain. The reply from Mom came the next day. Do as you like. That was it. Seeing those words, my chest felt just a little lighter. She didn't stop me. She didn't deny my judgment. I thought that was enough. I sent nothing to Emma. I couldn't find the words to send anymore. I went back to work and returned to my usual life. Wake up in the morning. Get on the train. Greet colleagues. Sit at my desk. Nothing changed dramatically. It's just that the number of times I went back to my parents' house decreased little by little. I stopped answering the phone immediately. I increasingly declined family gatherings with excuses. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't a severance. I was just redrawing the outline of my life by myself for the first time. From around that time, whenever I remembered my family, I began to feel a strange sensation. It wasn't anger, nor sadness. It felt like looking at memories from a distant place. I remembered a few things from when I was a child. The day I went to school alone for the first time. The night I brought home my report card. The faces of my parents looking a little proud when I passed the college entrance exam. In those memories, talk of money hardly ever appeared. Maybe I had always thought love and control were the same thing. I lived without being able to distinguish the difference between the feeling of being protected and the fact of being decided for. In that house, someone always decided. Education. Where to live. When to visit home. Necessary money. It wasn't violence. It wasn't an order. But inside the words, for your own good, my choices vanished little by little. I couldn't remember the moment I became an adult. Since when did I regain the right to decide my own life? Maybe it was the day I opened that statement. Not the amount, nor the mechanism, nor the system. I did not consent to my own life. The day I quietly realized that fact for the first time. I am not recalling this story to judge anyone. I'm just organizing it in my heart over and over so I don't return to that place. I don't want to lose my family, nor do I want to hate them. I just wanted to stop being made to sit at the edge of my own life. One night, I put the trust documents in a box. I didn't throw them away. I didn't burn them. I just put them away in a place that wasn't easy to reach. I decided I would no longer use those numbers as proof of my worth. Instead, I rented a small apartment with money I earned myself. And I opened my first savings account in my own name. It was a much smaller amount than the balance of the trust. But for the first time, I could clearly think, this is money I chose. And I bought a chair. It sounds silly, but it was the most significant purchase of my life. It was a vintage reading chair, upholstered in a deep emerald velvet. It was expensive, far more than I should have spent on a single piece of furniture. It didn't match my curtains. It took up too much space in my small living room. If Mom were here, she would say, that's impractical. If Emma were here, she would say, it doesn't fit the aesthetic. If Dad were here, he would ask, is it worth the price? But I bought it. I didn't ask anyone. I didn't justify it to anyone. I swiped my own card, arranged the delivery, and placed it right by the window. On the first night I sat in it, the velvet felt cool against my skin. The cushion was firm. I sat there for hours, watching the city lights. This was my seat. For 28 years, I had been sitting in the folding chair at the kids' table of my own life. Waiting for permission to speak, waiting for leftovers, waiting for my turn that never came. But this chair was mine. The money used to buy it wasn't managed by anyone. It wasn't for the future. It was for now. It was for me. Sitting there, I realized that freedom isn't just about having money in the bank. It's about the ability to make a mistake if I want to. Maybe this chair was a waste of money. Maybe it was impractical. But it was my mistake to make. And that luxury tasted sweeter than any sensible decision my parents had ever made for me. A few months later, Mom called me for the first time in a while. "How are you?" I answered, "I'm good." The topic of the trust didn't come up any further. My family hasn't changed. They will probably continue to think they were right. I don't deny that. I just stopped depositing my life there. Finally, I rephrased that sentence in my own way. Beneficiary consent was not required. But for my life from now on, my consent is required. Just with that, I felt like I finally became the beneficiary of my own life. Even now, I sometimes think about it. Was it right for me to distance myself from that house a little? Was it a mistake to doubt the family money? I still don't know the answer clearly. However, there is only one thing I know. Compared to the self that lived without doubting anything, and without choosing anything back then, the current me can breathe just a little more quietly. Whether that is the right thing or a selfish thing, I still cannot judge. So, I want to ask you. Did I make the wrong choice by distancing myself from my family? Or was this a necessary step to consent to my own life for the first time? If you were in this situation, how would you judge it?